Welcome back to Words of the Wise. Today I have Chief Beazizo from Lake Stevens PD in Washington. He is a part of the Washington Police Chief Association and has 33 years experience in law enforcement. Welcome to the show, Chief Beazizo. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Paige, for having me. I appreciate it.
Of course, I was hoping that you could start with a little bit of background on you. How did you get started in law enforcement? Give us a little insight into those 33 years.
So I've been, like you said, 33 years in law enforcement. I started out as a Washington State Trooper following in the footsteps of my father, who spent 25 years with the Washington State Patrol. I went there until I was 44 years old. I was able to retire after 25 years of service. I started out at 19, and so I started out early. I went from high school right into college for a couple quarters and then got hired by the Washington State Patrol. And then I was gone out of law enforcement for almost 2 years, went into the school district and worked for a local school district. And then I came back into law enforcement with Lake Stevens Police Department about 8 years ago. I was hired as a police commander overseeing the support services division. Then I was promoted to deputy chief in May of 21 and became the chief August of 2021.
I love it. Being the son of someone in law enforcement, did your dad teach you anything before or during your career that helped to prep you?
Yeah, it's kind of funny you say that because my dad, he was really not wanting me to get into law enforcement. Our grandfather was a police officer up in the county just north of where I live now. And he was like, this is not a job that I want my kids to be a part of. And then he saw how much I wanted to be a police officer. Being a very young age, I would follow him around, ask him questions, and start when I became 14, I was a police explorer for the Washington State Patrol. And then when I got about 18, getting ready to get out of high school, my dad says, "You really want to be a Washington State Trooper?" And I said, "Yeah, Dad, I do." And he goes, "From this point on, I'm supporting you." So
Mm.
he helped me get my job as a radio dispatcher with the Washington State Patrol. And then I became a trooper when I became 21 and went through the academy. So it was just growing up and just seeing how my dad and the effects that he had on the community because he worked in a remote area, clear what's called the North Cascades as an outpost trooper. And he spent 20 some years patrolling the roads where he grew up. We were all born and raised in the same community. He went to the same high school me and my brothers went to. And, so I saw the impact. I saw what the community, they looked up to him and saw what he did for the community. And that really drove me. I wanted to return and do the same thing and give back to the community I grew up in.
So his initial words of wisdom to you was don't do it. And then he saw your passion and your drive for it and he said, "Okay, I'm going to support you in the decisions that you want to make with your career." Why do you think his initial knee-jerk reaction was, "I don't want you to be a part of this"? Do you think it was stress or the nature of the career? Was there anything specific that he had maybe said to you, like, "I don't want you to be a part of this"?
Yeah, it was a lot of the stress. I mean, he grew up and coming through his career, starting out his first traumatic incident was two people racing, and there was a baby in the car, and my mom was pregnant. Um,
Mm.
Sorry, I get emotional on this stuff. He the car wrecked, and he had to do CPR on that baby, and that's the stuff that he had that he shared with us. He was responding to a shooting. He went to fatal accidents involving people that were our friends in the community and those kinds of things. And that's what was really hard was the trauma that he saw, the frustration that he saw. And then it was what he was on a traffic stop. One of his last traffic stop he made, there was a pastor that he'd stopped, and that pastor just started yelling and screaming at him. And you could see when he came home that day, he was very, very frustrated. And within a couple weeks, he ended up retiring just because of all that pushback and yelling and screaming and the trauma that he was having. But he was like, this is a hard job, and you have to understand. Just it looks fun. You see Chips and you saw TJ Hooker and all those kinds of shows that I grew up on, and he says that's Hollywood, and what's really out here is totally different. But he understood as we grew that it was a passion that I had as being a Washington State Trooper. I grew up in a community where people started laughing because I would ride my BMX bike around investigating accidents where my friends were and writing tickets to my friends on a BMX. And my dad, he just tried to keep the trauma away from us, but he couldn't because where we grew up, we were all so close. And you saw that as he got more into his career, it was getting harder and harder for him. But he provided a great service for 25 years. So
I really appreciate that you shared both sides of the coin. You first said my dad made such an impact in the community, and I can see all the great things that he did, and I aspired to be that too. There's also this other side of this profession that is really hard, and you see a lot of really hard and traumatic things. And so we know that that does something to someone over a long 20, 30-year career. And, now we're in this day and age where wellness is a big focus so that we can help individuals in this profession be able to offload some of those things so that you can continue to be that, beacon of hope and support within the community. When did you start really realizing that wellness was something that was important and something that you had to prioritize for yourself and for your organization?
The first time was in the kind of late 90s when I was a state trooper. I was involved on a traffic stop where a gentleman shot at me.
Mm.
I went home after that incident. I came back a few days later. There was blood on my patrol car still from one of the people that got hit by one of the rounds. It was 4th of July. I was with my buddy who I went through the academy with. I stepped out of the car on a traffic stop with him, and somebody threw a firework at the back end of our patrol car, and it made me just get back in the car. I mean, I could just feel the trauma in my heart start racing and all the memory back to what happened a few weeks earlier during that other incident. And then in the probably a little bit after 2000, I had a friend who was over at my house the night before he committed suicide. He was a fellow colleague of mine, and he was going through some stuff at home, and he was just going through a lot. And he came over, we had dinner, we were sitting there that night. And the next morning, I got the phone call that he went home and um, committed suicide. And that really hit me. It was like, what did I miss? What did I, we were having dinner. Did I do something to cause this? And I had no idea. And then a few years later, in the late 2013, I lost a close friend of mine in a motorcycle accident. I was his sergeant. He wanted to ride motorcycles, so I worked my hardest to get him on that motorcycle. Then I became his lieutenant. And unfortunately, he got killed in a car accident. And so, our motorcycle accident. So it was really hard. I mean, it's just all that trauma you see, and why am I going through all this, and keep asking that why? Why do I feel this way? Why do I react this way? Why am I getting frustrated? And I started to see myself that way. So it became a passion of mine to go through training and to get a better understanding of it. I was involved in the FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, for early 2000s to about 2007, where we went out to the Washington Memorial. And being out in DC and seeing that really changed my perspective. I saw the trauma from the families who have lost loved ones, their young children. That put a big perspective on it. And it's like, how can we do better? How can we help our officers and their families and all those that have lost the fallen get through all this? And that was my passion, is how do I do better? And then when I became chief, it's like every one of these people are my people. They're my family members. I always joke around saying I have kids at home and kids at work, but it is true. You take care of your people because they're the ones that provide the service. They're our biggest resource. And how do we get them through this? I see these young officers coming in right now. I have a staff of 47, and 11 of those people are eligible to retire in the next 3 years, but 22 of them have less than 5 years on.
Wow.
That's almost half of my department that is brand new. So then I'm thinking in my mindset, what is it that they're going through? Everyday life. What did I go through? I had kids. I had to buy a new house. I had to go through some traumatic incidences, loss of loved ones, and those kinds of things. And so these young officers and young staff are coming in, they're going through the same thing, the daily life stuff that every normal human being goes through, plus the daily life of being a police officer or being a staff member in this police department, and the trauma and the stuff that they're exposed to. How do we take care of each other? So we really work together, and I've been working with one of my wellness coordinators here and trying to develop something that just helps everybody. And we do that what I call an a la carte. What resources? Because everybody's different, right? Everybody needs something different to help them get this and get better and get through the resiliency. So
Yeah. I think that it's important for us to remember where we came from. And I think that the hardest things that we go through in life are our biggest opportunities to help other people. And by no means do I want to go through these hard things, or I want anyone else to have to experience the things that you experience in your career. I can't even imagine. I think that because you went through those things, because you have that experience going through those things, now you have this opportunity as an executive in leadership to be able to say, like, I know what it's like. Like, I know what it's like to walk in your shoes. I know what it's like to be a young officer and to have a family. And I know what it's like to be in these critical incidences. And I don't want you to have to go through some of the things. Obviously there's some things that you can never ever avoid in this career. But I I think that because you have that perspective, now you're able to lead from a deeper purpose of why. And I really do want to talk about some of the strategies that you have come up with organizationally, because some of the stuff that you said to me actually got me thinking in a different way, which I have a lot of conversations about wellness. So for someone to like kind of flip that, like, oh, like let me think of it that way, I thought was really interesting. I want to start with recruits. So when we had a conversation, you said, you're trying to start promoting wellness and growth as early in the career as possible. And so you have some things that you do with your people who come straight out of academy, and I was hoping that you can explain what that is.
Yeah, so we put together what's called law enforcement coaching. It's a coaching mechanism that we assigned a coach or a mentor to these young officers that are going into the academy. We use field training officers that are become the mentor. So when they're down at the academy, they have somebody to fall back on and talk to. We also had a company that's called Law Enforcement Coaching to come in, and they provided people that the young officers could call and ask questions. It could be anything. It could be, why am I feeling this way today? I feel like I'm overwhelmed. I have finance problems. I'm having a new baby and I'm at the academy. All those different things where people have been through these life experiences that can help them come up with this plan and build resiliency to say, hey, what you're going through is normal. The reactions that you're having are common and it's going to be okay. Let's come up with some goals and some plans so you can stay focused and help them with the resources and tools that they need. And that really has helped us, especially with the turnover we've had. We've had about a 60% turnover in the last year and a half.
Mm.
And it's just getting these young officers to have somebody they can turn to. Sometimes in a small agency, people have a hard time talking about different things regarding peer support and those kind of things because of the confidentiality and stuff. But this really started the program a couple of years ago, and it's really helped our officers, especially the younger officers, to understand that it's normal. It's okay.
Yeah, I think that it's so isolating if you don't have that. If you don't have someone being like, hey, kid, like I've been there and you're having a completely normal reaction to something that is completely abnormal. And like, we're here to support you. And I think that that is a really good strategy for breaking stigma early, is to create that kind of team mentality of like, hey, we're in this together.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that I've heard, and I'm curious to hear your perspective on this. But one of the things I've heard is there are a lot of people who maybe don't understand the career fully until they graduate, and then they're in the career and they're like, whoa, this was not what I expected. And then they leave. And so there's a lot of time and investment that's happening for these young people coming through the academy. And then maybe they don't really fully comprehend what the job entails. Do you think that this coaching program is helping to like set more realistic expectations and helping them to have maybe a little bit more perspective on some of the lived experiences of what they're stepping into?
Oh, of course, because they're getting that the everybody in this department has gone through trauma and it's okay. And it's the things that we learn from, right? We get into something like this and we have to learn from our what we have been through and how to make it better. If we look at everything and say, "Hey, why did I go through this? How do I do this better next time?" and change that mentality, we become stronger. And growing up in the state patrol, it was what I always called learn by Burrell.
Mm.
You became a new sergeant. Here you go. Here's your new detachment. Go off and conquer. And then you had to learn. So I looked at that and I said, how do I make it better for the next sergeants coming in? I made a sergeant field training program and implemented that. And it's just because I needed to have those mentors and coaches and those people that I could turn to say, hey, I'm going through this. I've never been through this. And then you have this coach and mentor come in and say, hey, I have been through this. I didn't do it right, maybe, or I did it this way and it may be different for you, but here's a beginning and an end that came out for me and how I handled those things. And anything we go through, especially in law enforcement, it's all new. Every day could be different. And you have to learn, that it's okay. You got people that you can turn to, that you can trust, that you're giving your life every day and making sure that you're making it home safe, and you want to do the same for everybody else. And if you look at that perspective of making your goal at the end of the day to make home to your family, how do I do that better? And just putting that through yourself. I always do, where I put it in my brain like, okay, this day something like this happened today, how would I handle it? Whether it's somebody in crisis, it's somebody that's been in a car wreck, or been lost a loved one, is how do I look at this and put myself into that perspective and then change the way I may handle it to help me build the confidence that I have. And that's what happens with young officers, is just putting themselves through scenarios and just trying to build their confidence in those kinds of things, because they're exposed to things that they never even thought of. I mean, when I got into this job, I can tell you that I've learned so much. And there's things that I never knew I was going to be in front of. I always told my professor, he goes, well, why are you becoming a state trooper? You should become a chief at a municipality. And I said, no, I'm going to be that outpost trooper like my dad, stay out in New Halem and work out there. And now look where I'm at today, because I
Mhm.
never thought I was going to be here. But
Yeah.
it's that's my path. And this has been my path in law enforcement. So it's just, how do you do it better? And coaching and having those mentors, I mean, we're trying to do that more of a statewide initiative to do something like that, is just because we all deal with that. We had a officer involved shooting last year and with our agent a couple of years ago. Sorry, it's been almost 2 years now in our agency. And that's the first time I ever been through an officer involved shooting as a chief. So I called my mentor over in Eastern Washington and said, "Hey, you've been through this. What am I missing? And we went through it. And there was a time that afternoon that the shooting happened on a Friday, and by Sunday I was just like sitting in my chair, and I'm like, I'm feeling all this pressure and all this stuff. Like, how's my staff doing?" And I picked up the phone and called every one of my staff members just to check on them, to make sure that how they were doing and how it was being, they're processing things and answering any questions that I could answer, and just made sure that they're okay. And I called every one of them.
Um, you know, it's when you're talking, it's interesting because I started this podcast because I was always hearing, I wish. Like, I wish I would have known, or I wish I would have had these resources, or I wish I would have listened to someone when they told me this. And when you were speaking, I was thinking to myself, man, I wish when I was younger I would have had a mentor to guide me through my life, and things would have been so much easier for me. And I think to your point, you're like, man, like I'm sure you wish you did too. You're like, we had to learn through Braille. Like we had no idea what we were doing, and we had to just learn on a whim, in real life. And I think that it's important to remember that, because I think that we tend to kind of isolate, right? We tend to kind of like silo ourselves. And it's important to remember that there are people out there who have done it really well, who have also done it really not well and have learned from that. And there's people who have done it many times, not just once, but many times. And there's people that you can learn from. And so I really like that idea of having mentors or coaches, because man, there's so many things I feel like I could have really just set a quicker trajectory for myself, and I could have learned from other people in my own life experiences if I had someone guiding me along the way. So I'm really glad that you take that focus, because I think that it's important, and it's important that people feel like they're not alone, and that there are people who have experienced these same things. Because again, I think that we do. We so often are like, man, like I'm the only one feeling this, or I'm the only one who's ever made this mistake ever, and I think that to understand that no, there's other people in this community that can help you.
Right.
I There's one thing that you told me that I thought was really interesting, is you said that various assignments need different resources. Can you explain a little bit about your thought process on that?
So looking at our agency, we're broken up into different units. I have my investigation unit, which is my detectives. I have support services, which are my school resource officers, canines, school and traffic officer, plus my community service officers. Then I have my records unit that does all the processing of cases, body worn cameras, public disclosure request. And then I have the operations, which is patrol. They're the ones that with the boots on the ground doing the day-to-day operation stuff. And then inside the units is who is inside that, right? What are they seeing? What are they processing? So the operations side of it, they're at the scene, they're smelling, feeling, touching everything that's happening. And then you go to my records unit who gathers that case report after the officer's done and the body worn camera, and then they have to process it. They put it into evidence, get it to the prosecutor's office or into the case file. And what are they seeing? Because they're not smelling, feeling, they're seeing. So they start asking these questions. They're like, well, what did this happen? How did this happen? And what do we do as humans? We start filling in the gaps sometimes and putting our own answers in there thinking this is what happened. And then my evidence officer and processing the evidence, what are they seeing? How are they feeling by all this? Especially when it comes to kids and trauma with kids and all those kinds of cases, that's very impactful. My school resource officers who are sitting at the school and dealing with the kids that they deal with in the schools, and then what are they be impacted by? And then my investigation unit, right? They deal with some very, very bad things, especially crimes against children. That's very, very hard on them. And so, how do I break it down and build up a wellness program for each one of the units? Because every unit is different and making sure that we have the right resources for them. I really took to the records unit because I saw my records unit really didn't have any resources or any information. So I sent them to a full day's worth of training where they came in and talked about, hey, when you process the body worn cameras, you may see this stuff. And when you start feeling that way, how does that make you feel and what can we help you to process that stuff? And one of the things that came out of it was so simple, that a massage chair. They'll
Mm.
go in and they'll do some PDRs, public disclosure requests, or watch body worn camera. And then during their break, we bought a massage chair, and that thing has been used more than anything I have for wellness because it helps them relax after that when they're feeling that pressure and stuff. And then just my investigations unit, I'm looking at how do I onboard them when they're going into investigations? What are they going to see? What are they going to have to investigate? And building an onboarding process and making sure they work with a mental health professional to go through and help them, and then have check-ins. Whether it's weekly or every couple of weeks or monthly, they check in with a professional to say, hey, this is how I'm feeling. Or if they have a bad case, go talk to the mental health professional to say, hey, this is how, I need help getting through this. And then an offboarding, because once you are offboarded from all that and see all that, how does that make you now when you transition up to a supervisor or go back to the road, and how you're feeling because you're seeing all the stuff on the back end? How are you going to be able to transition? So it's just breaking it down by the unit, because most people think it's the patrol officers. It's patrol, the people out on the streets that need the help. Well, it's everybody in the back end too, because we're all seeing different parts of the investigation and stuff. So, and then it comes down to command staff. We are, I consider, a unit. And how do we get through things, right? Because we're still affected by everything. Like I was talking about earlier about the OIS, it affected me. And it's like, what do I need from that? And what does my command staff, what does my commander, my deputy chief, and my administrative manager need from that? Because we're all part of this, right? But we have to be careful because we're administrators. We can't always say things to our other staff. So we have to go outside for those resources and those kinds of things.
I really appreciate that perspective. And, we talked a little bit about this offline, but I think that there's so many conversations, and I think that there is an understanding that wellness cannot be a one size fits all, right? It has
Right.
to be multifaceted so that it caters to the individual. But I had never thought, I guess, in the context of how can you divide it into all the different units within the organization and figure out what everyone needs, I think, within the unit, and then as individuals, what can we do to support them so that they feel valued as a person? And I'm curious. I know you said the massage chair was something that helped one unit. Are there any other trends that you're seeing? Like, for example, maybe your detectives unit is like, man, like we really want to work out on duty, or like there's another that's like, hey, like we really want to, have an on-site therapist. Like, are you seeing any trends within the units where they're all kind of under the general consensus of something specific that they want?
It's funny because you say that, but it is different, right? We brought in an MHP with a dog, a therapy dog, right? We had that person here for a little while. And then we had law enforcement coaching coming in and being the mentors and the coaching part of things and doing some training. The massage chair. We have our detectives wanting to do an onboarding process for detectives coming on and off. So that's what they kind of needed. But it all comes down, they all need something,
Right.
right? And so, yes, there is very good positive impact of everybody needs something
Yeah.
because we've got to do it. But what is that? And my wellness coordinator, I think it's all down to that is they all see that we need this wellness coordinator to be able to go out and put this a la carte menu up, and we have it up in our different places around our offices. Here's your resources for nutrition, here's your resources for your benefits for your insurance, what things are paid for, your counseling or MHPs, people that we've already um, reviewed and said, hey, these are people that you can talk to for counseling and that know law enforcement. They know what you do every day compared to somebody just off the street. So we go in and we interview, and we did that with our MHP, is making sure that they understand law enforcement and people can build trust with them. And that's been very impactful, is just like you said, is bringing that a la carte and giving those resources, vetting them, making sure that they're going to fit into our program, and then giving those resources out to the officers. We have an app that was paid for by Washington Sheriffs and Police Chiefs Associations, and we have our resources for that. So it's just all these different things that are programmed together, and then how do you get it out to the officers and stuff like that.
Yeah. And you mentioned executive wellness, that you also need wellness resources. What do you think executives need the most or are asking for the most? Because I know Washington is a part of initiative right now. And so I was hoping you can kind of explain that, but then your thoughts on what executives need.
Yeah, so the Washington Sheriffs and Police Chiefs Association, president last year, Chief Lowe out of Redmond PD, he was really pushing for executive wellness and going through that process. I believe he was on one of your programs here earlier this year and
Was, yeah.
spoke of some of this stuff. And it's what do we need, going through a traumatic incident. Like I said, when I was involved in the officer involved shooting, I reached out to my peer over in Eastern Washington, but we don't have a peer support group. And with the laws here in the state of Washington, you need to be recognized as a peer support member by your department to have that confidentiality, and then how we have to go through that process. But we've gotten through that, and now we're building a program where our sheriffs and admin can go out and have a peer support. So when something happens, that group will be identified to be able to go out and help law enforcement executives across the state when they need it. It may not be an officer involved shooting. It may be, we had the Oso mudslide back in 2013 here that affected a lot of us. I mean, there was 46 people killed, and I knew six of them personally because it was in the area where I grew up. And it's like, how do you get through those resources and have somebody there to help you out when you're trying to lead and being part of the incident command? And I think it's a great program, and I look forward to it. I know I'm going to be a part of it. I've gone through the training to be a part of that because I see how impactful it's going to be, especially across the state of Washington.
My hope is that those types of initiatives spread across the country. I know that there's some states that are really spearheading initiatives like that. I know Washington is one of them. I think I've heard maybe one or two other states that are trying to model the same type of peer support network for leadership. But I think that, we do a really good job of taking care of other people. Like I have that quality too. Like I think, I'm preaching wellness all day long and I'm like, here's all these things for you. And then I have to take a step back and be like, okay, am I taking care of myself too? And I think especially in law enforcement, in leadership, you're so good at taking care of your team. And I know you kind of consider or refer to them as like your family, you're like PD kids, And so I think that you guys do such a good job of that, but I do think it's an important reminder that you also need resources. And I don't think it has to be, I think this is for everybody to remember, it does not have to be a traumatic or critical incident where you need resources. This could be that like you're having some financial issues or you're having issues at home with your family or maybe you just feel really stressed and you feel like you want to talk to someone about it. Like it doesn't have to be after a really big event. Like these resources can be available and utilized just as we call it like that preventative maintenance, right?
Mhm.
It's like before things get really crazy, how can you offload even the minor day-to-day stresses so that you can operate for a really long time? Like that's the goal. And it's not just a long time in the career, but it's like, how can you have a really long life in general? And
Yeah.
I think that it's important to remember that there's preventative stuff. It doesn't mean that you're broken. It doesn't mean that you have to wait for something big. Like you can do these things on a consistent basis more proactively to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, it's really because you become overwhelmed, right? And it's at that point where you're feeling overwhelmed and you're not sure what to do. And that's when I hope people will get help and they'll say, "Hey, I'm not thinking about this. I'm getting overwhelmed. Everything's starting to feel like it's taking on this whole load." And they recognize that point to say, "Hey, I need to take a step back, take a deep breath, and reach out to people that can help me to make that checklist." Because once you can get that on, kind of written down and do that checklist and get through that, then you're going to be able to take care of yourself. And that's where I hope people get to because, like you said, they come overwhelmed and they start putting all this pressure in, and it just keeps building up and building up and building up. And before it boils over, and making sure that we have availability that for that people. I mean, the International Association of Chiefs Police is making a mentoring program. They have it in a database where people can reach out. So things are starting like that are starting to really help. And it's just, I just hope my colleagues will look at themselves and say, "Hey, I got to take care of everybody else." And they get to that point where they're getting overwhelmed that they just take a deep breath and said, "Hey, I need some help with this." And I built some really good relationships. I have a friend up in Fairbanks, Alaska, who's a chief, and we talk all the time about different things. And it's just being able to have that, right? And I have an old friend from the state patrol that's a local chief here now down in the Seattle area. We talk all the time. And it's just being able to run things past people to say, it's okay. Yes, you're overwhelmed, but you can get through it every day. There's nothing here that is we can't get through together. And it's having my phone. I tell people all the time if I lost my phone and all my friends, I couldn't get through anything. But when you have that time and you have that availability, you have that resource, it helps you get through those kinds of things, that it's going to be okay. We'll get through it. It's going to take time.
Yeah, I love that you said we're gonna get through it together.
Yes.
Because I think so often we feel like we have to do everything on our own. And so for you to remind like, hey, like together, you guys can support each other and get through anything, and you are stronger with
Yeah.
each other than you are individually. The other thing I was thinking, you're talking about this mentality of like all these things compounding on top of each other. Like you're going through the stress of life, the stress of the job, traumatic incidents, and it's like this, compiling of trauma and stress. And I think that historically, that was kind of the definition or the perception of resiliency. That if you just let everything pile it up, you shoved it down as far as you can, you postured up and you kept going, then that was resilience. And I think that now we're starting to see maybe a different definition of what resiliency is or can be. And I was wondering if you have your own personal definition of what resiliency is.
Yeah, yeah. Resilience to me is being able to recognize when you're going through something like that and you're feeling overwhelmed, that you know where to reach out to, that
Mhm.
you can get the help that you need and build the resources that you need to get through something, or go out and learn about something and get the knowledge so you know that way you are feeling is normal
Mhm.
because of the situation that you have, even though it's abnormal or not something you people deal with on a daily basis, it's normal.
Yeah.
It's normal. It's okay. So reaching out, building up friendships, and how do you get through this? I'm a very spiritual man. I trust my Lord and Savior to be able to protect me every day and get me through this is just taking that mindset. I sit down and I take a deep breath and I do box breathing,
Mhm.
because when I start feeling overwhelmed and those kinds of things, can you build the resiliency to say, I need this at this time to help me get through this? Do I need a friend? Do I need to get myself just in the right mindset? Do I need to exercise? Do I need some resources? What do I need at this period? So I'm not getting myself that stack on and keep pushing it down. I can get this out. I was involved in an incident back in late last year, that dealt with my family, and it was very traumatic to me. And I couldn't even go up to the top stairs of my house, but it was reaching out to a friend who said, "I can help."
Yeah.
And for me, it's like, oh no, I got this. I'm a cop. I'm strong. I'm bold. But I reached out and said, yes, I need this, and it was the best thing I ever did. And I went through EMDR training or through the EMDR, and it changed my whole mindset. And I'm a true believer in that now. Now we're trying to bring that resource in, is doing EMDR, the version lower than that, to give our officers that tool, right? We had a baby crib death that involved one of our local community members that we all knew, and our officers had to respond to that. We had another incident where one of my officers' son committed suicide, and we had to respond to that. So it's how do we get through that? How do we build our resilience to know that it's okay? Now let's get through it together. Here's the resources. I know how to reach out. And that to me is resiliency.
Yeah, the ability to keep going, but recognizing that you need resources to keep going.
Perfect.
There's
Yes.
there's no one, I don't know anybody who can go through what you guys go through for 20, 30 years and be able to get through that unscathed. Like you need to recognize that you need resources to be able to keep going. So I appreciate that definition very much. And um, my last question for you, and then I'll kind of let you take the floor if we miss anything, but what words of wisdom would you share with someone who's earlier in their career? Maybe something that you wish you would have known earlier or something that's helped you along the way.
The biggest thing for me is just learning my resources. Who are those people that I can build trust with and walk along this career with, and be able to reach out and say, "Hey, I'm having this thought or this feeling, and I don't know what it's like." And being able to do that early on in my career is you don't say anything. You don't say how you're feeling. You just suck it up and go back to work. It's now it's like I'm feeling this way. This is not normal. Who do I reach out to? And I just hope that our officers now that are coming into this, trying to become the young life and young parents and all those great things that life brings to us, that they're going to say, that's the new way. That's the normal way. And I have the ability to reach out. My chief's not going to get mad at me because I'm seeing a counselor or I'm seeing a mental health therapist or whatever it is. It's okay. We all have to get through this. And if that's your resource to get through this, that's great, because what you do at home also comes to work. And if we're taking care of everything, we're all going to be better.
Yeah,
And that is making sure that you're taken care of. And if that's your resource that you need, it's okay with me.
I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. I want to give you the floor if I miss anything for any final words, but that's all I have for you. And I really appreciate you spending some time with me today.
Yeah, I know. I appreciate everything you do. I watch you on LinkedIn and the stuff that you're doing for all the different agencies, and it is important. And it's teaching people that it's okay. And that you're all together, as you said, as a team. We can get through this and help each other. Be the best goal for all of us is to reduce the suicides in law enforcement, and it affects all of us. We've all been impacted by that. And if we can do this and help people build resiliencies and give them the resources they need, hopefully we can take that off the plate and not have those anymore, because that impacts all of us. Because when they're gone, everybody's asking what happened, and that's hard.
Yeah, you know, I I think we talked about this before, but I started this as a total side passion project. Um, and originally it was just like, wow, like I'm just hearing so much really good advice. Like I was always having conversations with leadership and I was always hearing like, I wish, and maybe if I would have done things differently, or maybe if I would have known, then like this would have been better, or like this would have been better, or maybe, and I was like, how can we bottle that up and how can we just share that? And I think that it's become a lot bigger than I ever anticipated. And so I've been so honored to have so many people like you on here and sharing your perspectives and your life experiences. And my hope is that this becomes a platform that inspires and educates people to take care of themselves in a more proactive way. And to your point, I do think that conversations are more powerful than we know. And the more that we can talk about these things, the more normal they are, the less stigmatized, the less shame associated with it. And I hope that that does save lives. I hope that that is something that, in a small way can, like you said, let people know that it's okay and you're not alone. And there's so many people out there who are in your corner and we all want you to succeed and we want you to be here and we want you to keep going. Like, just don't give up. Keep going. Like, we've got you. There's so many resources out there for you. So I appreciate you being a part of my mission. It really is not lost on me that you spent your time with me to, share your message with our listeners. And thank you to everyone who's listening and who's spending time with us today and on this important topic. So thank you.
Yeah, I just hope we impacted one person. That's all it takes. I
Yeah.
had a friend 9 years ago that I worked with. He came out 2 weeks ago and said, "Do you remember on this day what you said to me? It impacted me so much. It's changed my life." And 2 weeks ago, he shared it for the first time. And I impacted one person that you don't even know who you're impacting, and it makes a difference. So
Yeah.
that's what's important. So hopefully today we impacted one person.
I hope so too. You're gonna make me cry. So before that happens, I'm gonna sign off. But thank you for listening and thank you for your time, Chief. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paige.
Of course.